Hello and welcome to the Toolbox Takes podcast, brought to you by Roof. I'm your host, Chris Kishiri, and today is the very first episode of a new podcast series that focuses on and celebrates the hard work of those talented individuals involved in all facets of construction. Each episode, we interview an expert to further enhance our industry knowledge and hopefully have a little fun doing so. If you want to reach out to our podcast, you can find us at www.venturoof.com.au. Or on the socials, of course, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and TikTok. Just search for us at Roof. Now, before we get into today's guest, I should probably start with a little bit about myself. So I've now been involved in the construction industry for about 5 years and am the national sales manager for a company called Roof. We supply a national ventilation product for residential and commercial construction. My role essentially is heavily focused on understanding sustainable buildings, energy efficiency, condensation management, the ongoing ever-changing National Construction Code, of course, and then educating all the stakeholders, which pretty much includes everyone. So from designers, architects, builders, roofers, tradies, all the way down to your basic business or homeowner, so they understand exactly what ventilation is, what the minimum requirements are, what the benefits are, and how they can incorporate it into their builds. So that is my role in a nutshell. And that, I guess, leads us to why we're here and the whole Toolbox Takes podcast, where the mission really is to chat to as many experts in the field as possible, educate myself and you, the listener, on best practices, techniques, code updates, and experiences from experts that know a lot better than I do. So without further ado, I'll introduce today's guest. His name is Damien Gunn. So Damien and I go way back, so we might get a little bit colloquial at times, but I assure you we are great friends. I met Damien when he was a very different person, destroying me at poker in his late teens, early 20s. And even though he's a solid person, unfortunately, he is a Carlton supporter, so we won't hold that against him. He's on a bit of a high at the moment, but yes, absolutely. He is obviously therefore on a bit of a high at the moment. So welcome, mate. I suppose, can you go through a little bit about yourself and your role and what you do at the moment and what trade you're involved in?
Yeah, thanks, Chris. So I run IRT Roofing and Cladding, a family-run business for nearly 20 years now. So we've been very heavily involved in the ventilation, roofing, and condensation management space for a long time. Even before these codes are even popped their heads up, we've been dealing with this issue for 20 years. So we've been here mostly commercial and industrial, but probably the last 7-8 years we've been hitting the residential space, which is probably, if not more challenging than industrial commercial. So yeah, it's me in a nutshell.
Beautiful. And so with your transition towards residential, do you find that is more or less code reliant?
Oh, well, I'm very heavily focused in commercial and industrial. So that's my kind of bread and butter. That's what I do most of the time. I've had to kind of learn the residential space about 7 years ago. It is pretty much zero documentation compared to his 379-page contract with 463 plans, a finishing schedule, a specification, and there you go. So compared to his one plan, go quote. So it's
just go do it. Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, I think that definitely covers my space and knowledge of the difference between the industries. Is that you are just definitely expected to know everything before you step foot on that roof. So you can't just wing it, I guess, is probably one way to put it.
The crazy thing, honestly, is it's like, here's the documentation to price from. And then when you price it off the documentation and you install it as per that documentation, they say, oh, yeah, but you should have known that, you should have A, B, and C. It's like, come on, man.
And then look, I suppose that...
And then you lose the job. So here we are.
Yeah, no winning. Yeah, I mean, holistically, that's probably why this podcast really got off the ground in the first place, is it because there is just I think there's just a huge gap in the industry, in the building industry in general, just in regards to what the expectations are, what the changes are, how often they change. Do they really need to follow the changes? Who's checking it anyway? The list goes on. and depending on who you talk to, you'll get a different response.
Well, if you can continue talking to all the different trades about these issues, I mean, you're going to get a really good holistic view of every trade. And I know some trades are very heavily regulated and are very all over it. And then there's some trades who literally rock up to a job ready. What am I doing today? So it's very diverse out there.
Yeah, for sure. So I did want to touch on this a little bit, just to sort of go over, just because you are in a bit of a high at the moment. But your Supercoach rank, mate, you've been bragging about it all week. I will say to the viewers out there, if you do recognise me, I'm actually the co-host of another podcast called Supercoach Insider, and I've been getting absolutely smashed. And every day I come to work, have a chat with this guy. And he's, what are you, like 150 or something now, or something stupid?
Yeah, top 200 rank, which is better than you and Ben and Swizz, might I add. But that's okay. I look for you for guidance. I've followed your guidance. You don't follow your own guidance, but
that is basically what I do.
So I think you should do this
good.
week, and then Friday night happens, and you've changed what you've done. So
we have a toolbox talk on Friday for Supercoach.
It's a lot longer than a normal toolbox.
We actually started scheduling time in our calendars and realized that's probably not a good idea. It is what it is.
We're doing well, though.
We are doing well. So go through a little bit of your background, buddy. So how did you start as a roofer? How did your journey start? I mean, I've known you obviously the entire time, but to the viewers out there who don't know how you even got involved, and I know you said it was a family business, but how did you go from, I don't even know to stepping on a roof to labouring to now I'm running one of the largest roofing companies in Queensland? How did that transition work?
Yeah, so my dad was a subcontractor when I was growing up. He was a roof tiler by trade. So I used to go out with him and help load tiles and throw tiles off the roof and clean the ground for him when he was roofing. It's actually me, my mum, and my dad were doing that. And then around 2000, business, really? Yeah, exactly. It's a full on. So that was growing up. We used to do that, and then moved up to Queensland. And he started getting into diversifying in supply and install roofing. Then he got into metal roofing, and then kind of tinkered around the residential space and kind of light commercial space. And then I didn't graduate high school till mid 2006. I graduated, and then I had an opportunity to jump in and work with them for a year, which I did. I went overseas for a few years to kind of travel around and see what else is out there, and then come straight back into it, and pretty much had a plan. Essentially, my family had a plan and said, if we want to take this to the next level, you've got to get your head wrapped around sales, estimating, installation, site stuff, like to get a good holistic view. So I couldn't have a better traineeship. Essentially, I pretty much learn all facets. And
here's the entire business. Just go learn it all, please. That'd be
great. Pretty much. So it was actually, do you know the honest truth? It was like our estimator just fired. We fired him. So now you got to go learn that. And then it's like, oh, we're short guys. Damo couldn't do that. So it was probably a bit of
the whole
awesome planning.
Classic sort of. At the time, I guess it was small business, so everyone wears many hats, right? So here's your new hat today, Damien. Would you like to do that? That's fantastic.
We put a foot through the street, we need you to plaster, install battens, and
nice. Yeah, and so along the way, as I said, you obviously do mainly commercial and industrial. Now you're dabbling in that residential space. What talk us through some of the more memorable jobs that you've been on and your experiences on them, and probably the bigger jobs, I guess, and how they sort of shaped the way that you run the company today.
Yeah, well, the most memorable jobs are usually the ones that go incredibly bad, or so we won't talk about the bad ones. But the biggest ones, the biggest jobs are the ones where you've got a full team. So as a trade-based business, it's pretty rare that you have jobs that you need a project manager, 2 site foremen, site labourers, like a normal building site. But in a trade side of business, you don't really get them big jobs. So them big jobs are probably the most memorable. So we did the Cairns Convention Centre re-roof and wall and Safite. that was a huge job. We had a very tight deadline on that one. So if anyone's seen the Cairns Convention Centre, it's pretty much shaped like a seashell. So
Oh,
it was impossible.
sounds easy.
It was impossible. It was also a nightmare,
Who's the
which is why it's
architect of that
memorable.
project?
Yeah, he's fired
Yeah.
for sure. So that was memorable. Oki Army Barracks, we had a good job out there for good part of a year. We're out there, got to see the Black Hawk choppers and all that while working. So pretty intense. But they're probably the two biggest jobs that we've had that we had to get into.
Nice. And so the transition to residential, what sort of put in that push, and why are you moving towards that side of the business? Or is it sort of an ever flowing thing where you're jumping into different types of roofing at all times?
Yeah, good question. So pretty much, in order to scale your business, well, we've found in a roofing industry that it's ebbs and flows. So re-roofing is really popular when it's raining and repairs. So pretty much when it's not raining, everyone forgets they have a leaky roof. So if you just did re-roofs, when it's summer and it doesn't rain for 6 months, everyone forgets about it and you're slow. So then you get into new roofs in those times. And then once you get into new roofs, then a bit of, like right now, we don't know what's going to happen. BAs have gone down by 30%. So new's going down. So then if you jumped into just new and you start slowing down, then where do you look? So we've pretty much just diversed. And our game plan is pretty much to have our major project, commercial and industrial projects, to kind of keep them as our baseline as a company, and then feed our other divisions and just keep everyone busy. When you find good staff, you don't want to let them go. So you pick up
Mm,
work to keep everyone busy full time all year round. So essentially, that's
yeah.
how we got into it, just by necessity.
Yeah. And I think it's the hardest thing in business, right? Finding the right people. And I know that you guys dabbled a little bit in insurance, re-roofing and things like that. So was that spawned by just the sheer demand? I think it was, how many years ago now did we really have a big season where everything was insurance repair? Was that 2, 3 years ago essentially, or?
Oh no, mate! We've had a the last 2 years have been the most quiet for probably five. So in 2015, I think we started in Maruka in Brisbane when that was
Yep.
a storm. Then we went to Gympie. Then we went to Springfield. Then we went to Sunshine Coast. Then we had Cyclone Debbie up north. Then Canberra had crazy hail. So then Coffs Harbour had hail. Coffs Harbour got hit again. So it's and once again in that particular industry, if you just did insurance and just did storms, for 2 years you would have been pretty quiet. So
Yeah.
diversification is pretty much key in those industries. But how we
And
got
lots of
in
travel as well, I
insurance,
guess.
well, business as usual is tough sometimes when you do like a commercial business because it's all tender based. So unless you've got contracts with particular builders, which is pretty rare, they always want market price. So they never really lock you in on rates or yearly contracts or cost plus or anything like that usually. Um, so insurance is very rare that someone says, "Hey, here's 50 jobs, here's 100 jobs." So
Yeah.
when there's a storm and someone says, "Here's 100 re-roofs," okay,
Sure.
you're gonna say no. For these
No.
rates as well, because demand's high, right? So everyone wants
Yeah.
them done quick, fast, and efficient. It doesn't always
And
happen,
that sort of
especially when
bleeds into
everyone's got 100 jobs.
yeah, that sort of bleeds into the next part of what I wanted to chat about. And I think demand of labor obviously seems to be very high all the time in roofing, at least in my experience and in what I've been involved with. But also, I don't see a lot of new tradesmen coming through, or quality tradesmen. Um, so, would you say that the amount of labourers coming through has decreased over the years, or do you find that there are less skilled tradesmen? And what would you suggest to people looking at coming into the roofing trade as an industry?
Yeah, so the roofing trade is probably one of the very few trades in Queensland in particular that is qualified, unqualified. There's definitely a difference in pay and training and skill, but you can still get a really good pay being a roofing labourer in Queensland because if you're
Okay.
fast with your flashings, you're fast with everything, pace counts. And then if you do that for a long period of time, you can get paid pretty much just as much as tradesmen if you're a good roofing labourer without the qualification. Whereas I know, like for Sparkies, for example, like if you're an
You're a
unskilled,
sparky or you're not. Yeah.
there's no Sparkies labourers who are flicking cables around and signing off
No.
shutdowns or anything like that. So it is a bit different. So the roofing trade is a good way to get in, essentially, to the construction industry, earn good money to start with. Like anything, going to TAFE is definitely a difference when it comes to skilled labourers and trade. If you go through your trade, you're 100% going to learn the nuts and bolts and the regulations, where the standards are. Whereas some people come through wanting top dollar in our industry, and you say, what's the HB39? They have no idea what you're talking about. So
Yeah.
doing your trade is essential for any trade, and that's a good place to start. And I would probably recommend trying to stick with like a smaller crew, a smaller company if you
Okay.
can, just
Yeah.
because getting in with a little sole trader or a smaller business, you're going to learn a lot more, a lot faster. So that's probably the only thing I would say if you can.
Fair enough. Another question I wanted to just go through with you. So everything seems to be getting automated, and the building practices are changing all the time. Have you seen much change in the roofing industry over your time, or does that seem to be pretty steady and pretty constant? And is there anything on the horizon that you think may be good or bad for roofing in a technology sense? Hopefully, automation is not taking away all of our jobs, but yeah, how do you see that space at the moment and moving forward?
Yeah, so from a new product development AI, I don't really see too much new technology when it comes to metal roofing. It's pretty much your screws get a bit of an upgrade, your coatings get a little bit of an upgrade. Not a lot of new products, which is why Ventaroof's kind of a bit of exciting for us to actually have a new product in the market. Um, in terms of AI and new innovation, it's really coming from drones in our roofing sector. So drones can now fly over a roof and show you where the moisture is, show you where the heat's coming from,
Okay.
show you dents. So if you're doing a roof report or hail damage report, you can kind of see where all the damages are. AI is now starting to have a look at, they can do roof takeoffs and sheet lengths and work it all out just from
Oh,
flying over the house. So I
that's
know that's a
awesome.
lot of being driven a lot from the US. So the metrics are not always in our favor there, but it's getting pretty quick. So I think that's where a lot of roof reports hopefully will be a lot faster and more efficient with AI.
Yeah. So in terms of money turnover, that's a good because you charge I'm not sure what you charge for a roof report, but you can pump them out a lot quicker, which means you can do a lot more. Hopefully yield if you're doing insurance or repair work or maintenance or anything like that, you can turn that over for the client a lot quicker.
Yeah,
And you
100%.
don't need as many guys running around all over the place trying to just do a report or do a quick quote or anything like that. So that's good.
Well, it just opens up the field. So you can literally have a full-time drone operator as a job instead of a roofer also having to do it.
Yep.
You mentioned before the shortage of trades. Well, I've got two roofers going around doing roof reports. You can have one or two drone guys going around and keep the roofers doing the roofing. So it's
Yep.
also an asset there.
Nice. I like it. Now, code wise, I've always wanted to, it's part of the podcast that we want to touch on and I suppose highlight, especially to the listeners out there, is the changing of the code, how often it changes, how much that impacts your specific trade. So I know for me, pretty much it's not solely reliant, but a large part of ventilation seems to be the be all and end all at the moment in the NCC. Energy efficiency, condensation management, huge movement, huge talks. Everyone's pushing it. Everyone's sort of knowledgeable about it, but also no one really understands it, which is my part of my role is trying to educate that. How have you seen that in roofing go over the years? Is there any specific changes that you've had to make? How do you educate your teams on it? Or do you just take it on a job by job process? Once you get those plans in, you rely on the architects or the designers to have incorporated those into those plans, or how much of that is left to the trade at the end of the day?
All right, I got a good question for you in answer to this. When you're trying to sell Ventaroof to the roofers, what do they say?
They
What do
don't
they
like
say?
change at all. They don't want to.
They
They
don't.
don't want to learn anything new. They've been doing the same thing for 20 years, and it worked so far. So,
Exactly, but I'm sure
um,
they would always say, "If it's on the plans, I'll do it," or, "If it's specified,
absolutely, yeah,
I'll do it." So from
yeah,
a roofing perspective, builders, the 7-star ratings, like what they're going for, and the builders change. The builders are extremely responsible for all of it.
yeah,
Maybe not particularly from a re-roofing side. So not long ago, uh, when we were ever doing re-roofs, now if there's more than 20% of a roof getting replaced, we have to get a building approval. That never used to happen. Roofers are now in charge of doing tie down upgrades in carpentry work. When we do a re-roof, so we have to get engineers involved. So,
oh,
those type of
yeah,
code changes run through our association and run through the QBCC, and are pretty, pretty, I guess, broadcasted
yep,
through us. Even these days, still, I think that came out. I'm going to go probably 4 or 5 years ago. Don't quote me on that, but we've had the price, all those extra elements in. But even this week, I lost the price to someone who's not including that in a price, because the homeowner doesn't want to pay
no,
the
of
extra
course
to
they
get
don't.
engineering and to get the BA and to get the tie downs done. So they don't
Yeah,
care. So the roofer's like, "Oh, well, I'll still get the sale and move on." So that's why, like, I feel like my safe space is commercial industrial, which is like, everyone doesn't like it as much. But with commercial industrial, the builders are so switched on to, like, even just like firewalls, like fire ratings, green star ratings, if there's a green star, or 7-star ratings, or all their
yeah,
documents, all of their specifications. And that's also driven from their clients. Like if you work for Department of Education or the government, like their specifications are huge as well. So for them, it's way more intense than us. And I don't ever really get asked directly, like, how can I make this work? Sometimes you do. But a
yeah.
lot of the times, unfortunately it's on the builder's hands to kind of, and responsibility to sort out.
Yeah, I suppose so. You've got, in large buildings and commercial construction, you've got, project managers that are their sole role is to focus on that. Contract administrators that are, following up with making sure that all the trades are dotting their I's and crossing the T's, and following those processes. Whereas in residential construction, you might only have the one single builder, might be just a, small uh, design and build guy that is doing everything
Exactly.
himself,
Well, yeah,
and
look, you can't
very
bury your head in the
completely
sand
different.
either. You can't
Yeah,
just bury your head in the sand and say, "Oh no, they'll take care of it all for us." We've got to protect ourselves and make sure we are doing things properly as well and as per code. So it's a fine line. Usually when we do hear change, we ask the builder about it, and they're like, "Oh yeah, we're working on it." "Oh yes, well we're designing it." So the process just
yeah,
takes forever
yeah.
with anything. So
Yeah,
it's
and
it's a tough
well, I
one.
mean, with the new changes, so they had obviously the NCC 2022 came out. Yeah, I think they announced it late 2022. Usually it would be earlier. And they were like, okay, well, we'll start it off in a year's time or whatever that may be, and then they roll that over. And then it gets delayed again, and it got delayed again, and it seems like builders aren't coping at the moment. And I think that part of that is part of the due to the we obviously had a shortage of some materials. We had steel price increases and supply chain cost increases right across the board. How did you guys manage that in its entirety? I mean, I think you guys probably went through it as well as roofers.
Mhm. Well, the good news for us is that the builder, yes, they ask for quotations at the start of tender time, so they know a rough price, and they get our pricing then. But usually they're so busy that they don't send us a contract till probably, man, anywhere from 2 weeks before job starts, and then if they're really switched on, probably 6 weeks, maybe 8 weeks.
Okay.
That's being ahead of the game. So when price rises occur, we add them on our price, and then if we price it before a price rise that got sprung on us, we're able to redo our price and send it anyway. So I guess the liability that we had for holding them prices was pretty short term, as opposed to
Hmm.
builders. They'll price something 2 years ago, negotiate a contract, start the build, and then by the time they get to roofing, it's been a year, and we've had 3 price
Yeah.
rises in that time. So they're the ones holding the bag, which is why even this week GCB have just gone into liquidation. Huge builder.
Oh, really?
Hmm.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, and well, that seems to be happening, across the industry at the moment. We are seeing, quite a few builders fall over for various reasons, whether that be in the commercial sector. I know that there quite a few large commercial builders went under, but also obviously in residential builders too.
Mm.
Hopefully, we don't see that trend continue, but the pressures seem to be on obviously supply costs, and now with the added pressures of an increase in the cost of builds and things like that. My knowledge at the moment of what it's going to cost with the new sort of condensation management and energy efficiency stuff is it could be roughly anywhere between 5 to 20 grand, depending on the type of build that it is. But then I saw a report like 2 weeks ago saying, "Oh yeah, it's going to be like 70 grand." And so I think there's a lot of misinformation out there in the industry. I'm not sure if that's just to try and
But
twist
do you
arms.
think, do people come to you and ask for solutions because there's issues though? Like, we're so far
Yes.
behind. Even in New Zealand, across the
Yep.
ditch, they've got ventilation, for example, on everything. You go to anywhere in
Yep.
America, they've got stuff on everything. Like, their roofing systems and designs are, I wouldn't say that they're better in regards to like product, but they're definitely more switched on when it comes to systems, like creating
Yep.
air coming through the fascia all the way up to the roof. And they think about these things mainly because they've got large weather swings. So it's really cold and it's really hot. But at the same time,
Yeah.
Australia is pretty hot and it's pretty humid. Like, we've got our own, climate issues here as well. And I think for
Yeah.
Australians do kind of bury their head in the sand and very reactive. Like, okay, we've had 10 issues. Now we've got to change it now, 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 which is probably why with this
Yep.
all NCC stuff, it's like they went too hard, too big, too quick. And the builder's like, well, just let's just woo
Pull
on a
back.
little bit. Yeah, yeah, pull back. Let's just wait a sec and actually, maybe itemize it and piecemeal it out and say, and roll it out.
Which I totally get. I suppose when you're in the trenches like I am, with a lot of condensation issues and things like that, it always definitely comes back to area. And I find it funny that the biggest area that I find has the problem at the moment is Victoria and Tasmania. They have the most condensation problems by far. It's climate based, right? So, like you said, New Zealand have more ventilation than the entire Australia. I guarantee you they do, because they've realised that colder climates suffer from
Yeah,
more condensation
100%.
issues.
Yep.
Um, Unfortunately, with the national code, they've come out and said, it obviously hasn't done what they wanted it to do over the time, and they're trying to change that. But very much, area is the biggest, or the climate is the biggest determinant of where or how bad something is going to be based on the current standard. So um, I find it strange that Victoria are the ones with the biggest pushback and wanting to delay things, but they're also the ones, in my experience, that have the most problems holistically through the code. And I've got builders calling me all the time saying, "Yeah, I built like to code, and now I have all these issues. I've got to go do remediation works now." And that's the phone calls that I get on my end. So
Mhm.
roofers contacting me saying, "Yeah, like this, I've been doing this for 20 years, 30 years. Nothing's changed, and now all of a sudden, all these problems." I'm like, "Well, that's going to happen." So
Well, yeah,
yeah,
look, it
it's
might
an
be a
interesting
big
industry at
hit
the moment.
early on, but these standards it seems like they're really thinking about it at least, and they've got some decent solutions in there to kind of prevent these issues from happening. So it might be a hit in the short term, but the long term, you may not have to change anything once again in the next 10 years, 20 years. Like, you got to get it right, though. We're pretty far
Yeah.
behind.
So, what would you suggest? So, I suppose we tackle this problem on a day to day basis. But yeah, we've mentioned it a couple of times now that roofers are old hat. I feel like that's general trades right across the board. Everyone likes doing it how they were taught to do it. But after their apprenticeship, they go, "Yep, I've learned everything I need to know about this trade. I never need to learn anything ever again. I'm all good." How would you suggest is a good way to be able to roll out changes that are going and educate, trades, with them being satisfied that they're learning something that's going to be positive for their actual experience and job, but also that they're not going to ignore it and just be like, I don't need to worry about that. Is there any sort of
Well, I think
suggestions or
tackling real problems is probably the issue with that. And I think if I understand your question, probably like, trades don't like new things. Well, that's cool. And I agree with some extent. So it's like safety, for example, has been a huge thing in our industry. And if someone's working on a live edge 5 stories high and now edge protection is now a new safety thing that we have to do, you're not going to hear anyone put up their hand and say, "Oh, this is bullshit." I don't want edge protection 5 stories up. No one's going to say that because it's like incredibly
No.
practical, But instead of putting 1 screw in instead of 2, seems silly as a change. For example, it's like why are we doing this? This is unhelpful and stupid. If you have
Yeah.
practical change in the industry by talking to industry experts or people in the field or associations or someone, and they say, hey, this is an actual problem for us, let's tackle that problem, instead of someone saying, okay, these are the 36 changes we're going to go starting tomorrow, let's go. It's like, well, wait a minute, are these actually necessary, and what are they necessary for? So with my guys especially, all the apolic cladding issues that we've got, so fireproofing issues, there've been some pretty terrible situations where buildings are up in flames, and that tape, man, that will light that your building
Yes.
will go up if it is, right?
Yep.
So cladding's starting
Well,
to
that was
become a
hugely
big thing.
publicised with the big building in Melbourne, wasn't it? That the entire just started burning one day.
And it kept going
um,
because the tape is so it's
yeah.
like 1 square meter equals like 1 liter of fuel. Like that's the test. That's literally
Wow.
what happens. So it's like who's going to put their hand up and say, oh, okay, no, we don't have to change that. Well, obviously we have to change that. So, to the credit of a lot of roll formers here, okay, cool, they're coming out with new wall cladding solutions, and people are going to have to start learning different wall cladding systems, and it's happening. It's practical, and my guys actually like it. It's a good finished product, and they like that change. But it's sensible, and makes sense. So, as I said before, like the standard changes which are irrelevant to helping
Yep.
the industry are just ticking a box, I guess. Or if they don't
Yeah, that's
understand.
where they get frustrated. Yeah. And
Like if you had a
understand.
house that's absolutely full of mold and disgusting and whatever, you'd be a lot more up to it.
That's it. Yeah, anecdotal experience is the number one reason why people will be like, okay, well, what happened with this roof? How can I look at this roof and then use that as an example to teach others solutions on how to combat that? That's all good in hindsight, but I suppose a lot of the code is preventative, and they want to try and put measures in place so that even though, from a worst case example, and I think the easiest way to say this is the same street, say in Brisbane, for example, you could have 10 houses on it and not a single issue on one, but one in the corner has a massive amounts of mold, and the reason is that there's trees that overhang it from a certain direction and then doesn't dry the moisture and the condensation during the day, for example. But the knowledge of, okay, well, it's just the tree that's the issue, but that could also be an issue in other streets and other places too. So they could have installed 10 houses completely fine and just go, well, let's just not forget about that 11th one. Or they could put measures in place across all of the 10 houses that won't happen for any of them regardless. And I suppose that is what the code is trying to push, but not necessarily getting successful with from the trade level, I guess, is the best way to put it.
Yeah, we'll see your system, for example, residential ridge ventilation. Like obviously you get more surface area to vent, right? It's actually
Yes.
quite easy. You have to put a ridge on anyway. So, the change, you can kind of explain it, understand it, and people are like, yeah, okay, that's cool. 1 whirlybird, an opening in your roof this big is not going to do anything.
Yep.
What's that going to do realistically? They leak, they stop. You get, it's a nightmare to put them on. They're cheap, but that's the thing. They're cheap, right? They're cheap. They're nasty in
They're
your ticket
cheap, they're
box.
quick. Do you guys?
That's
I
easy.
think I saw a video once of you having a competition with on a commercial roof, like the fastest guy to install a whirlybird. Was that you, or is that one of the
Yeah,
boys on site?
yeah. That was
What
a.
was
That
what
was,
was
I
the
was there.
record?
I filmed it. But that's the
What was
thing.
it?
Like,
What did the record end up being?
I think it's like a minute 40.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so
That's
that was
insane, by the way.
a minute 40 to, yeah. So just from scratch, that was to cut the hole, put the whirlybird on, cut it, dress it in, put the hood on, screw it off. Yeah, the lot. Minute 40.
Done.
So,
Minute 40.
well, yeah, that's
That's
great.
amazing.
That's why people do it, and it's easy, and you can get it done. However, is that going to fully ventilate your house? No, it's not. So people might complain
Absolutely
about it.
not.
So,
Yeah. I completely understand. All right. Well, look, mate, it was awesome chatting to you about all things roofing and your experiences and in the commercial, industrial, and obviously now residential space. It was what was the name of the company again?
IRT Roofing.
IRT Roofing. All right. So, guys out there, if you are looking for a guy in that space that knows what he's talking about, hit up Damien. Do you have social links that they can hit you up at, mate?
Oh, just LinkedIn's probably the best. Damien Gunn at IRT Roofing is where to find me on LinkedIn. We post pretty much every week, every second week of projects coming through and what we do.
Nice. Well, do you have
Perfect.
any
Thanks,
a
Chris.
big one coming up at the moment? A big project that you're looking forward to?
That's the hard thing. It's like look forward to. It's like so much work, but it'll be good. So uh, yeah, we've got a big shopping centre coming up in southeast Queensland. We've got a lot of different
Awesome.
products, a lot of new products, a lot of architectural stuff. So we'll be there for the next year. So yeah, looking forward to it.
Awesome. I look
Awesome,
forward
Chris.
to
Thank
it,
you.
mate. Well, thank you very much for your time, and we'll catch you next time.
Thanks, man.